Hi guys, and welcome back to the FLEA Circus. The title of this week's video, How to Live. This past weekend, while we may not have been able to be together physically, we were able to come together spiritually over one indisputable fact. Jesus Christ arose. He walked out of a tomb alive forevermore. Which means that while the actual event occurred in what some would call ancient history, some 2,000 years ago, Jesus Christ is present tense, just as alive and present and active today as he has ever been. What does that mean? It means that we can live boldly, knowing, not hoping, but knowing that the literal master of the universe, the author and sustainer of life, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, is daily, moment by moment, walking alongside us. A virus? So what? He's the great physician. Economic uncertainty? So what? His riches know no limits. What lies ahead of us? Who cares? He knows the end from the beginning. Want some details, some specifics? How about these? One from the Old Testament and one from the New. As the New American Standard translates these words from David in Psalm 37, the steps of a man are established by the Lord, and he delights in his way. When he falls, he will not be hurled headlong, because the Lord is the one holding his hand. And in the New Testament, as Jesus was preparing to send his 12 disciples out into ministry, he shared these words to encourage them in Matthew 10. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care. And even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. The very hairs of your head numbered? Now that's intimacy. Now that's closeness. How can we not be, to borrow from Paul in Romans 8, more than conquerors when we walk in the company of the greatest conqueror of all? How can that not inspire how we live? Remember when Peter and John were arrested and brought before the Sanhedrin? Luke tells us about it in Acts chapter 4. He wrote, the priests and the captain of the temple guard and the Sadducees came up to Peter and John while they were speaking to the people. They were greatly disturbed because the apostles were teaching the people, proclaiming in Jesus the resurrection of the dead. They seized Peter and John, and because it was evening, they put them in jail until the next day. Then they had Peter and John brought before them and began to question them. By what power or what name did you do this? As they began their examination of the 2 apostles, Luke adds an interesting dimension to the confrontation in verse 13. When the rulers, elders, and teachers of the law saw the courage of Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished, and they took note that these men had been with Jesus. In other words, the faith in which Peter and John were operating looked like something. In the same way, our faith must look like something to impact the world around us. And with Jesus right beside us, every moment of every day, how can it not? So all this being true, how should we live? Some thoughts from the scriptures. First, we can live joyfully. As David wrote in Psalm 16, you make known to me the path of life. You will fill me with joy in your presence, with eternal pleasures at your right hand. Secondly, we can live confidently. As Paul said in Philippians 4, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Third, we can live fearlessly. As John wrote in 1 John 4:4, he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. And lastly, we can live triumphantly. As Jesus said to his disciples in the upper room in John 16, In the world you have tribulation, but take heart. I have overcome the world. In a word, as Paul said so well to the church at Rome in Romans 8, if God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? In light of all this, everything we have seen in Jesus Christ, which, as his kids, he has promised to provide for us, we are left with one really important consideration, sort of in line with the response of the religious leaders as they listened and watched Peter and John. When people watch us, when they listen to us, do our lives reflect the fact that we have been with Jesus? Do our actions and attitudes reflect Christ to such an extent that they remind people of Jesus? That was the conclusion of the religious leaders as they watched and listened to Peter and John. Man, these guys act like people who've been with Jesus. Folks, that's our call as ambassador of Jesus Christ, to represent the Father as he did. He has given us everything we need to accomplish that purpose. So no matter what we do for a living, let's make representing the Father be our greatest business. God bless y'all.